all, I would like to welcome you all on this pleasant evening of May 16 to this webinar session on leading powerful conversation. And secondly, I would like to thank you all for taking out time from your busy schedules and to be here. So I generally start my session on a positive note. So in case if you would have been meeting in a physical space, I would have asked you to give a round of applause. But since we are experiencing physical distancing, I would request all of you to bring your hands together and just rub your palms. Just rub your palms for 30 seconds and just, I'll tell you why we are doing this. Just rub your palms. If you could see me in the video, then just bring your palms together and just rub them. Okay, and the reason why we have done this, because I just wanted to create some positivity and to, to wake up all ourselves and to warm up to the session. So again, on a thank you note, thanks to Best of HR Forum and Mr. Bijulal for giving me this opportunity to conduct this session. And as I said that, I'm an academician, and as my introduction has already talked about it. So I again have an uncanny way of starting my session with short stories. So before we actually move on to the topic of the day, which is speak to lead, I would request you to pay attention to a short story. So how this story starts or how this story goes on, the story is about a little boy. This boy is about 7-8 years old, and his father comes back from home and he goes running to his father, as it's a habit with all the kids, right? So he goes to his father and he says, father, may I ask you a question? And father was very tired. He just returned from his work. So he said, okay, yes, just one question. So the son goes and he says, father, I just want to know what you do for your living and how much do you earn for an hour? So the father was really agitated. He has just come back from the work and he was already tired. So he says, is this the question? Is this the time to ask such question? Why are you asking this question? He said, just if you may answer me. So father says, okay, see, I'm a contract labor and I earn $500 for an hour. So the son's eyes light up. They light up with a lot of hope and emotion. And he says, okay, father, so can I borrow 300 rupees from you? Now the father lost his, calm, and he was like, first you asked me this question, I returned asking me to lend you 300 rupees. Do you realize how hard I work to earn 500 rupees per hour, and you just want me to lend you 300 rupees so that you can go on and spend on anything you want, any toy or any other thing which is of no use? So again, the son goes very sad and he was like, okay, father, as you wish, and he goes back to his room. Now, after some time, when the father calms down, he realizes that probably he has done a mistake, and he goes back to the son's room and he says, let me just find out why he wanted to have this 300 rupees from me. He goes to the son and he says, okay, I'll lend you 300 rupees, but I just want to know what you wanted. He says, no. The son says, no, please lend me 300 rupees first, and then I'll tell you why I want that money. So the father puts his hand into the pocket and takes out 300 rupees and puts that money on the palm of the son, and son was happy, right? So he goes back to his bed and he starts taking out crippled notes under the bed, and seeing that the father was again very furious. He says that, no, you already had some money and you wanted more money from me, and what was the reason? So the father was like furious. He says that, you already had money. Why did you ask for more money? Now the son goes and says, father, this is 500 rupees. I'm giving you 500 rupees. Is what you told me in the beginning, that you earn 500 rupees per hour. can you come early tomorrow, and I want to buy an hour of your time so that I can have dinner with you. Now, I'm sure some of you might have already heard this story, and this story might have different moral values. But why I narrated this story, because I wanted to tell you that being a small 7-year-old boy, how he was able to lead the conversation. The conversation was between a man who earns his livelihood and a 7-year-old boy. But despite of that, a 7-year-old boy was able to make an impact and get what he wanted. So the art of pursuit, art of influence, the art of getting people say yes. And this is what we are going to talk about in the new course of the session. So we will come back to the story from time to time as we talk about what it takes to have a good conversation. But before that, I'm showing a slide on the screen, which is just a quick poll or a survey. And I would request all of you to put your answers in the chat, and then probably someone from Best of HR Forum can collate the answers, and we are going to discuss those answers towards the end. So the question, if you can read it out from the slide, it says there are 3 elements which are listed in here. It says, which out of the 3 elements listed do you think is the most important in a good conversation? So 3 elements that are listed. Again, see, this is not, we're just doing a quick survey so that we are able to gauge the nerve or uh, the pulse of the audience. So just take it in a fun manner, and we're going to collate the result in the end, and we'll bring you, or we'll present the result based upon your answers. So the first element that is listed here is humor. Second is connect, and the third one listed here is active listening. So you can use your own judgment and just vote out of the 3 elements, which one do you think is the most important for having or getting into a good conversation? Okay, thank you so much for your answers. Moving ahead. Now, I'll just take you through what all I have planned for this session, and what we are going to go through in due course of 40-45 minutes that we have. So we're going to start again with a warm-up activity, because I generally take my session in very interactive mode. So I want a lot of participation from the participants here, so that we can have an interactive session and see how we can, because I believe I'm not just an educationist, I'm a learner also. So come what may, I might be able to gather some learning from you people. So I'll request that you participate, as you have already done that. We're going to start up with a warm activity, and then we're going to talk about critical phenomena, which is very fast catching up, and which goes by the name of conversational intelligence. And what is its importance? Again, we are going to discuss it. We all are going through not normal times. We are going through difficult times. If you allow me, I can term it as the crisis that we are going through. So we are going to discuss the importance of conversational intelligence during crisis. Then we are going to talk about the theoretical concept also, because again, being an academician and an educationist, I always rely, or whatever I discuss, I always try to find the genesis in the theoretical framework. So I'm going to give you what goes behind the scene when we are having a conversation. And then we are going to discuss the practical aspects, that is, what competencies do we need in our daily life. And here, when we're talking about daily life, I mean both the professional and the personal level. So we're going to talk about the competencies that are required to lead a powerful conversation. And then another key takeaway that I'm going to discuss is SCARF. It's again a very recent model, and we're going to discuss in the due course of our presentation. And then we'll sum it up with a question and answer round. So this is how we have planned the session. So again, I'm putting up the next slide, and be ready to respond on the chat box. There's an image which has come up on your screen. Can you please identify what is this image about? I know, I am very sure most of you would be able to relate to it and come up with the correct answer. But since I said that I wanted to make it more interactive, if you can just put in your responses in the chat box. What is this image about? What is this picture about? So can I have some answers in the chat box? What is this image about? Are you able to see the image on your screen? The slide? Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
So yes, some people are very specific in their writing, and they're saying they're able to see Roger Federer and then tennis. Yes. So this, you got it right, and full marks to you, all of you, those who have answered it correctly. This is an image of a lawn tennis. So I don't want to get into the specifics, because again, my knowledge about lawn tennis is very limited. But I'll tell you the purpose why I have posted this picture in the presentation. The purpose of putting this picture in the presentation was that I wanted you to relate, or I wanted to give you a comparison or an analogy of a lawn tennis game and the day-to-day conversation, or a powerful conversation. That is what the topic is about. So when we talk about a good conversation, when we talk about a powerful conversation or a good conversation, if I may call it so, it's like a game of lawn tennis. So if you see that you have to be there on your side of the fence, the players are divided by a fence, and you have to be on your side of the fence and then hit the ball, right? You don't go to the partner side or to the other person's side to hit the ball. You have to remain in your side. And that is what a good conversation is about. When we talk about a good conversation, it is like you start, sometimes you take an initiation, and then you make a 50% contribution to the discussion as it is there in the lawn tennis game, but you don't cross over the fence. So you don't force upon your thoughts, your opinions, your suggestions to others, but rather be on your side, and then you keep on playing with the ball. So you initiate, if I can again compare the ball with the dialogues. So you throw a dialogue and you wait for the response, for other person's response. The other person hit the ball, and then it comes again into your court, and then you hit it. But you're not allowed to cross over the fence. And this is what is a good conversation is about. So just wanted to give you an analogy as to, when we talk about a good conversation, what do we mean about it? I hope I was able to put forth my point through this picture. So moving on. Why are we sitting here? This is another, because you will find a lot of pictorial representations in my slides, because again, that is, we'll discuss about it, why it is there. But if you again see, it's a pictorial representation of a ground, of a playground. And if you could see that the kids are holding their electronic devices, they're on with their iPads, their mobile phones. So again, I would like to bring forth the attention of the ladies and gentlemen who have joined me in this webinar, that why are we here and talking about a very, very mundane, very day-to-day topic of having a conversation. Conversation is like, we are born to have conversation. Being human, we are social animals. So why there's a need to talk about it and discuss about it, or someone to talk, take a lecture on it? The reason being here, if you could see from the picture, that we are, and especially our kids, if I can, again, if you give me the liberty to talk about it, is that our kids, the next generation, the generation which is there, which we call as millennial generations, or the Z generation, they have actually forgotten the art of conversation, right? And there was this survey, I would refer to it. The survey was conducted in few of the cities in America, and they said that the biggest fear, and this fear is as high as of committing a suicide, is of public speaking, or even getting into a conversation. Kids nowadays are really fearful of getting into a conversation. and this is the reason why are we sitting here on a May evening and talking about how we can lead a conversation, because we are forgetting the art. Even the adults, if you would have, again, this is a common scene out of any of our dining room or a drawing room, where people are there hooked onto their electronic device, and instead of talking to each other, they're talking to their devices. So one valid reason why we are sitting here and talking about having or leading a powerful conversation or a good conversation. Another valid reason that we are going to that I'm going to talk about is, and why we are having this webinar on leading powerful conversation is, again, I'll talk about, though it's already there in our surroundings, and I don't want to create more negativity, but we cannot also deny the fact that we are living in the time of crisis, right? So this is a model which was proposed by Kubler-Ross, and it is a grief cycle model. So if you see, there is a wave which is going on, and if you could notice, there are certain stages which have been listed. So Ross has listed 5 stages which an individual or a society goes through when they're going through a crisis or through a difficult time. So the first stage he has identified as a stage of denial. So I'll just relate it to this current situation. We are all experiencing the aftermaths of COVID-19, right? We are going through a very crisis globally. And initially when it started, we were all in a stage of denial. We were all avoiding it. We would try to avoid it. We said that it's not, even in the WHO, there was a lot of criticism about WHO, because if WHO would have paid some heed to it, the after effect of the pandemic would not have been that widespread. So we were in a, and as an individual also, we were in a denial stage. We try to avoid. There was a lot of confusion what to do. We were in a state of shock or in a state of fear. So this is the first stage that Ross has identified. Then he said that once we have experienced the stage of denial, we move on to the stage of anger. We get frustrated. We are not, again, I would relate it to our day, our stages. When we were going through the pandemic, we were in a stage of shock or fear. One fine day, we were asked to experience physical distancing. Everything comes to a halt. A normal life we were not able to lead. And for the initial period, we were having that honeymoon period, and then after that, the frustration seeped in. We were irritated, we were anxious about the future. How long is it going to last? What is about our kids' education? What is about my job? Am I going to lose my job? So that type of feeling, anxiety, nervousness started seeping in. So that is the second stage he has defined. And then finally, gradually, 30 day, 39 day, we came to the terms and we started the negotiating or the bargaining stage. That is, we were struggling to find measures. We were reaching out to others. What are they doing? It's not just me whose job is in danger, but others' job is in danger too. So what are they? How they are coping? How other companies are coping with it? I'm sure there are a lot of HR professionals there in this session. So they started consulting their peers or their friends who are in other organization, what measures their company is taking up, what are the plans for the future, how they're going to cope up with this, employee distancing, what are they going to do about work from home. So that is the struggling phase, and then comes an overwhelming stage. Again, we all have experienced it. So people who had high emotional intelligence were able to overcome it, the overwhelmness, the helplessness, and then try to find a solution. And some people, they were in a flight mode. So they said, I'm not going to think about it, let it be, I'll just go over it as it comes. And then finally, he has categorized the last stage, which is the stage of acceptance, and we finally accept the grief, and then we start exploring the options. What other options are available? Now, why I'm talking about this model, because if you could see at the bottom of the model, there are inputs which talk about the type of communication or interaction or conversation should follow in each of the stages. So if you see, when we look at closely at denial and anger stage, that is the first two stages, he recommends that there should be lot of information and communication. I know it will come as a surprise to you all, but it is a fact and it has been proven in the research that when people are in a crisis, when they are experiencing crisis, they value more of the facts and the truth. And again, I'll give you some reference of the speech because we are talking about the conversation. So I'll just would like you to recall, Winston Churchill, a famous president of United States, right? So he was there during the World War II, and then when his countrymen were being dead in the war, so he took it to address the people, and he was very famous for his speeches. So he
Arvind, just to correct you,
speeches, and then he started his speech when he was addressing to the nation which was in a crisis. He started stating the facts and the figures. So he gave them the figures, the truth about the casualty which had been experienced by United States of America. So he started giving a lot of information, and then gradually he started on to the next part of the speech. It's there on the YouTube if you would like to hear it. He started consoling, so he went into the consoling mode, that is bargaining mode, and then finally he gave them a plan of action, which is an acceptance mode. So if you look at the bottom of the model, you would see that what type of interaction or what type of communication should be there when we are going through in the time of crisis. And that is what all conversational intelligence is about. So we're going to talk about it in our next slide, and I just wanted to give you the background about it, that when we're talking about conversational intelligence, why it has become so imperative in today's time that we are going to have a session on leading a powerful conversation. Because again, we have forgotten first the art of having a good conversation, and second, we are living across a very difficult times, crisis times of crisis. So we need to examine what stage, if we talk about in terms of the employees, what stage of grief are they in? Have they reached that stage of overcome the stage of overwhelmness, anxiety? Are they in the stage of acceptance? And then accordingly we can mold our conversation. So when they have accepted, then they need lot of hand holding, they need lot of guidance, they need lot of information, because a new plan needs to be put in place. So some background, and this is what it is about when we talk about conversational intelligence. And I'm very sure, being HR professionals, they say empathy is the most critical of all the qualities that we look for in HR professionals. And I am very sure that all of you would agree and would have accepted that it is when we move from I to we, when we move from I to we, when we build across trust, from low trust to some kind of conditional trust, and then we move on to a high level of trust. And how we are going to build it, I'm going to talk about later in the due course of the presentation, when I present the competencies of leading a powerful conversation. So just to give you some basic idea, like why there's a need for conversational intelligence. And again, people from HR would relate it with what I have to say further, that most of our conversation has to relate with the neurosciences. There is a new field which has come up, NLP, neuro lingual programming. So we are relating to it, and then when we converse as HR professionals, we need to be very careful about it, how we are going to present the information, because most of the time it is the HR's responsibility to convey both the good news and the bad news. So the conversational intelligence is very much in vogue, and it is going to be there for HR professionals. Now, as I said, that we are going to talk about some of the theoretical foundations also. Being an educationist, I always rely upon the theoretical concepts whenever I talk about on a topic. So I just wanted to give you a brief idea. See, this is what the slide prior to it when we're talking about conversation. Conversation is what appears on the screen. What you are able to see on the screen, right? You are able to see a slide on the screen, but what has gone beyond or behind the scenes, and this is what we are going to discuss here. And I'm going to give you a theoretical model or a framework which will help you analyze or to improve on your conversation. Again, I would say that since most of you are from HR background, you would relate with it and you must have studied about it. So it's going to be a recap or a recall sort of thing. This model is about transactional analysis. And this model was given by Eric Byrne. He was a psychologist, and it was beautifully put into the book by his student, Thomas A. Harris. And I have given a list of suggestive reading, and if you could catch hold of the book, this book is about I am okay, you are okay. So the transactional analysis, it's like an interaction of a student and a teacher. Teacher has proposed the theory or propounded the theory, and the theory was actually converted into the form of a book by the student. And this theory is of transactional analysis. Now, what they say that human beings being a social animal, any exchange of information that takes place can be termed as a transaction. So transaction is the smallest unit of interaction between two individuals. Likewise, today what we're having a session. I'm speaking and you people are listening. So there is a transaction which is going on, going right now, which is give and take. Right? So they say when two people interact with each other, they engage in a social transaction. And each of these social transactions is known as a transactional analysis. And this model is it's basically a model to help us improve our interpersonal communication, right? So I'll tell you what this model talks about. This model, as Eric has given, it talks about the three ego states. Now, when we talk about three ego states, these are the psychological entities of a single individual. So I'll just again highlight that there are three ego states which are listed here as parent, adult, and child. In short form, they are known as PAC. PAC. Now, when I'm talking about parent, adult, and child, or when the tourist is talking about, I should say, about parent, adult, and child, he's not talking about three distinct individuals. What the theorist has proposed, he said that these three entities, PAC, are part of any of an individual. So I, being an individual, have all three of it. That is parent, adult, and child. And you, being an individual, has all three of it. That is a parent, adult, and child. I'll quickly take it over to you how as to what all these three state means. But I hope till now, am I clear that when I'm talking about parent, adult, and child, I'm not talking about three distinct individuals. I'm talking about the psychological entities of a single individual. So I hope I'm clear in this part. Just put across your responses in the chat box if you can. If I'm clear so far that I'm talking about three entities or three psychological entities of a single individual, right? So we start with the first one, the parent. Now, what is this parent about? Again, the theorist proposed, he said that each one of us has a parent in ourselves. And what is a parent? Parent is nothing but all the recordings that we are able to store when we were in the age group of 0 to 5. So whatever recordings are there in our mind, which we were able to experience, and our mind is stored, and those recordings are between the age of 0 to 5. They say again, most of the time when we are in the age of 0 to 5, we have heard our parents saying, please don't talk to strangers, never ever tell lies, right? So all these recordings stays with an individual, and they become a part of that individual in the form of an ego state, which is termed as a parent. So again, I'll give one example. You would have seen your, if you have a child, your 4-year-old child or your 5-year-old child saying, Mama, this is wrong. You should not do this. So that 5-year-old child is talking from his or her parent ego state, right? So again, there are certain body language signals which are listed here. So if you see, whenever an individual is talking from the parent ego state, the fingers would go up, the hands would go up, and the expression would change. So that is what the parent stage is about. Then the second stage is the adult. Did they say adult is the ego state which we are able to we are able to rationalize, we are able to have a logical thinking based on the context. So it is somewhere where as an individual, so it's a logical entity of the psychological ego states. So it actually examines the current situation in the right context and takes a decision. So again, this adult, if I have to give some examples of a conversation which is coming from the adult ego state, then it would be like, oh, the weather is really nice. So what I'm doing, I'm examining, or the weather is below 3 degrees normal, or because there is less pollution, we are experiencing quite a nice weather. So what I'm doing as an individual when I'm making such statements, I'm able to I'm able to use the logical reasoning, and I'm able to make a statement based on the current context. Now there's a final one, which is the child ego state, and this is about all our wishes, all our desires, and all things which exist in our unconscious level. So this is a child, and it says, you would have seen adult people also, maybe your employee whining, no sir, no way, I'm not going to do this. So it's like every individual has a child ego state, and it is like, please can I go early today? Again, you would have seen your employees coming to you with a request and presenting that request. So that when you hear such statements, you should realize that it is coming from the child's ego state of an individual. So just to give you some basic idea, now why we are talking about this parent adult child, why we are talking about parent adult child, because we want to understand, or we want to make a powerful conversation. Now, how all these three things are related to powerful conversation, if you can see that when we interact with other people and we are able to interact with the same level of the ego state, then we say we are having complementary transactions. Again, I'll take you back to the initial stage when I started talking about the topic. I said that we, as in individuals, we interact, we are giving and we are taking. So when there is a transaction which is going from similar ego state to the other person's ego state, so a parent to parent interaction. So I'll tell you some examples, like what it would be like having a parent to parent. So I said that parent is nothing but an entity where we have stored all our recordings. So it's like never ever say a lie. So I made a statement, you say, and in response, I get a statement from you. Yes, I've heard it number of times that it is a sin to say a lie. So what you say, a parent to parent transaction taking place, what you have heard in your 0 to 5 years, and what I have heard, we are getting an exchange and we are in harmony with each other. Or it can be with an adult to adult, like the statement that I made, that we are experiencing nice weather because the pollution has come down, and you respond back, yes, because there's less traffic on the roads and the industries are shut off, and that is why we are experiencing a nice weather. So again, you see that these transactions are complementary to each other because they're coming from the same state, right? So it is from the parent state to the parent state of the other person, or adult state to the adult state of the other person. Or it can be complementary in a sense where a parent telling, a parent state coming from an individual going to a child stage and the child obliging. the child in the individual obliging. So you are telling your employee that this needs to be done. I want you to be ready with the presentation by 2 o'clock. And he says, yes, sir, I'll get it done. Don't worry. So adult conversation, or okay, you give me a lot of work, but I'll make sure that I'll get it completed. So again, these are some of the examples of the complementary transactions. Now, most of the time when we talk about these complementary transactions, they result in harmony, they don't result in hurtful feelings, and they lead to a smooth and a hurdle-free communication. But then there are the totally opposite of it, which are the cross transaction. Now what happens in a cross transaction? It's a cross transaction where you are speaking from a ego state and you get a response from an unexpected ego state. So I'm speaking from my adult ego state, like I'm not able to find my keys, and the response that I get from my spouse is that you are such a forgetful person, you keep forgetting your keys. So if you see that I'm asking as an adult, I'm not able to find my keys, and the response that I'm getting is from the parent ego state of my spouse, and he's saying that you are such a forgetful person, keep on forgetting your things, and you're not good with remembering things. So if you see, this is a cross transaction. So most of the time, these cross transactions, they result in hurtful feelings, they result in flight mode. If you remember, we said flight mode. So they result in flight mode. People start avoiding conversation with that particular person. So I'm sure, in our professional, in our personal life, we would have come across a person with whom we don't intend to have a conversation, right? And the reason being because we are not able to get along well. And one of the reason is because we are speaking from a different ego state. And next time you have a conversation, just keep in mind which ego state that the person is making a statement from, and then you can react. I would not say react, I would say act in a complementary ego state. Okay, so this is about the cross transaction. And then finally we have this ulterior transactions. What are the ulterior transactions? Ulterior transactions are like they are spoken at a very psychological level. So the person speaks something and the meaning or the intent of the statement is totally different. Like if I have to make a statement in ulterior transaction, I would say, oh, you're really looking smart today. So what, if you see the tone that I have used and the statement that I have made may have different connotations. One connotation being that, oh, you're looking very smart today. That means you don't usually look smart daily, but it is today only that you are looking smart, right? So if these are the transactions which are hidden, which convey a hidden meaning. And why are we talking about again that when we are having a discussion, especially at the professional level, we should avoid having ulterior transactions. So yeah, they result in fallout, and people are left to lot of presumptions and assumption as to arriving at the meaning of the statement. So as far as when we talk about having a good and a clear conversation or leading a conversation, ulterior transactions should be avoided. So just wanted to give you a theoretical framework as to when we converse with each other, what goes behind the scenes. So if you would have realized that lot goes behind the scenes. You have that pack working, that is parent, adult, child ego state working, and the interaction between these ego states define whether a conversation is going to be fruitful, it's going to be good, it's going to be functional, or it's going to be dysfunctional. I hope that has made some sense to you. Now, as I said in my first slide, that we are not only going to talk about the theoretical concepts, but we are also going to talk about the practical aspects, right? So how do we lead a powerful conversation? And I'll tell you, see, though the topic is lead to speak, here when we talk about leading to speak, here we are talking in a positive sense, and we're talking about not only over powerful, leading does not means overpowering a conversation. Again, I'll go back to the analogy that I made initially when I started off the presentation. I said that you cannot overpower, you cannot thrust your opinions, you cannot thrust your feelings onto other when you have a good conversation. So here, when we are talking about having a powerful conversation, we are talking about leaving an impact, leaving an influence, and developing deep conversation with others, whether we are talking in our private space, with family, with children, or we are talking about in a professional space when we are trying to build relationship with our employees. And again, I'll reiterate, these are the times, because again, we are working remotely. There is no physical contact between most of the managers and the employees, or if we have academicians on board this session, then the student and teacher. So just imbibe some of the takeaways from this session to have an influential or a good conversation. So coming back to the practical aspect, if you see on your screen, I've listed on the top row, I've listed three elements, which goes by the name trust, respect, and experience. So very important, and that is why I've put it as the foundation of the diagram. And as it is with any other relationship, trust is the foundation when we start to have powerful conversation or a deep conversation. So, and I know it's not easy to build trust in one go, or when you're having a conversation for the first time, but nevertheless we can always make an attempt. So here, when we talk about being trustful, we means being genuine. We mean stating the facts. I know sometimes it does hurt to state the facts, but it initially it would hurt, but gradually people would know that it is the genuine statement, the original statement, the facts that we are going to get from this person. So again, if you go back to that conversational intelligence diagram, that is a conditional trust or a low trust to a high trust position that would like to bring our party to, or our partner to, or our employees to. And moving on, the another aspect that we need to take care of is the respect. And I think if we have people from the communication, especially from the business communication field, they would always relate with it. It's always giving the due respect to the other party. So I've seen or I've engaged in conversation with people who would always say, oh, hi, how are you? And then they will move on. I am really into, say, any of the hobbies that they would list, and I've recently purchased, and they would name the gadget. So again, a conversation is not just about it's not just about I. It is about giving the due respect to the other person. So instead of starting, when you are getting into a conversation, like I said it's a nice weather, I'll just take that example only. So if I just add one more line to add respect, it's really a nice or a pleasant weather we are experiencing. What do you think about it? So do you see, I just added one phrase. What do you think about it? And it made a lot of difference. When I'm seeking, I'm giving opinion of the other, I'm giving the due respect. It's not just my opinion or my feeling that matters. I am ready to listen to you, and what do you think about it? So giving the due respect, or if we talk about in communication, having that you principle. So instead of saying, I'm really interested in canoeing, or I'm really interested in painting, or I'm into theater, or I'm a very good artist, if you say, I really like canoeing, and do you have any thoughts upon it? So again, it changes the flow of the conversation, and it brings in the interest of the other person, and it actually makes the other person active. And it is about taking initiation. Initiation is not just about going about and doing the blabbering. It's also about giving the other person the space to talk about himself or his opinion or his interest. Lastly, what I've mentioned at the top is the experience. Most of the time, and this is what we say, we look for, and if you say, see, we look for relatedness all the time. So we try to connect with people. Connect is listed as one of the pillars here, and we try to get ourselves engrossed in a conversation where we find some solidarity, it's where we find some commonality, right? So if you narrate some of your experiences when you are having a conversation, maybe you are sharing, you are guiding an intern as an HR, and if you share, when I started off initially my first job, and I also experienced the same struggle. So the moment you start your conversation with such phrases, it makes a lot of difference. It puts the intern into a comfort position. It gives the intern space to talk about his and open up about his own feelings and his own comfort level, and how, what feelings is he experiencing. So it's always a good idea to have a conversation where you can give instances of your own experiences. Now, if you look at the bottom of the diagram, I've listed few of the pillars. So connect, again, as I said, that people are able to connect with those people who have gone through not necessarily the same incidences, but yes, same experiences. So it's always a good idea when you are having a conversation with your team or with your students or in your personal life to include that pinch of relatedness, to include that pinch of connectivity by sharing your own experiences. Now, another important element is the intent and the purpose. Now, again, I would like you to go back to the story which I started with. I started with the story or a conversation between a father and a boy. And the boy was very determined. He was very clear about his purpose. And what was his purpose? Do you remember? If you can put it in the chat, what was the purpose of the boy of having that conversation? If anyone remembers, can you just put it? I'm just opening up for discussion. If you can just put it on the chat box, if you have heard the story, what was the purpose of the boy in the story? Okay, I got some answer. Um, yes, the purpose or the intent of the boy in the story was to get 300 rupees, so that he has a total of 500 rupees, which would buy ultimately an hour of his father's time. He was looking for his father's time. He said that, could you come early tomorrow, because I am giving you 500 rupees and that's what you earn for an hour, and I would like to have a dinner with you. So the intent of the purpose throughout the conversation was very clear, and it also helps at the professional level very much so, when you have charted out, when you have planned out your conversation. And again, I'll talk about because it's a forum of HR professionals, especially when you are giving a feedback, right? So there's always an art of giving a feedback, and if you can always plan it out in a certain manner before you start on with the conversation, right? We'll talk about it in later on also in our last slide, but the purpose of the conversation should be very clear and it should be very specific. Now the third pillar that we want that's listed here is simplicity and humor, right? So humor, I think I've given it in the question also, and let's see when we are able to collate the responses of the poll that we have given you initially. So humor is like the salt of a conversation, right? And self humor more so. So if you are able to, again, when you're talking to your employees, and if you're able to put in an element where you have experienced any of those embarrassing situations and how you have dealt with it, it always helps. And the simplicity. I'll give you an example. I'll explain the simplicity later on in the slide. But the classic example is, who is not aware of the statements made by Shashi Tharoor, right? So we all are aware about the heavy English or the words or the vocabulary. He's famous for his English vocabulary. We are not thriving to be Shashi Tharoor. So I'll just put forth this point that it's have those words which can which can connect you with gauging the or doing the analysis of the other party. So if you are maybe making a presentation in front of the top management and you think the technical jargons that you're going to use are going to make sense, go ahead. But if you are having a conversation maybe with your team or your colleagues, and you think that this technical use of this technical jargon or heavy vocabulary is going to put them in a difficult situation, then just please avoid it. Okay, and then pause and listen. Again, we most of the time when we are in a conversation, we are so determined to make a point about ourselves or our topic that we forget to take a pause, and that is very important. Again, I'm going to dwell some more. I'll again try, as we move on, I'll try to I'll ask you all, I should request you to uh, recall a great politician. And again, you can put your answers in the chat box, who's famous for taking a pause in his speeches. So if you could recall the name of the politician, a famous politician, Indian politician, he had been the Prime Minister of India for quite some time also. And if you could recall the name of the politician who was he was a poet also, and an orator par excellence. So if you could remember the name of the politician, and if you could put it in the chat box, who was very famous for taking long pauses. So let me just check if we have, yes, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, right? So I don't want you to, take such long pauses, but I'll just, it always makes a difference, and it gives other party to time to absorb what the point that you want to put forth. So it's always a good idea to pause in between when you are into a conversation, and it also gives you a breather to actually gauge the individual on the body language, on actually whether the person is mindful of the conversation or not. So it's like an analysis for you as well of the other party. So it's always recommended that you take a pause from time to time. And as I promised that we're going to dwell some more onto the simplicity part of the elements that are listed here. I'm just trying to move the slide. Yeah. So this is teaser for you. I'll come to the simplicity part in the next slide. But if you can read the screen, and there's an exercise which is given. I'll read out, and if you can summarize in one sentence and post your answers in the chat box, because again, we're talking about simplicity. We're talking about brevity. We're talking about maybe using humor. So if you can use any of those elements, and we are also talking about connect. I don't know whether trust has already been built between you and me as the two parties to a conversation. It generally takes time, but I think we have spent 30-35 minutes. So I think you would have trusted me enough to carry on with the session. Otherwise, I would not have seen any audience here. So thank you for being here till now. And if you can just go through this exercise, and if you can just put it in the chat box. This is for you to do it. This is a full 3-4 line sentence which is given in there. And if you can just summarize it in one sentence and post your answers in the chat box. If you're able to hear me, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are, ma'am.
So if you can just, I'll request all the participants to summarize and put it in the chat box. And let's see what answers we get. I'm not able to see the chat. Are you able to see the chat?
Yes, no one has responded.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll wait for another 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on. Okay, we have got one response. Let's see what response we have got. Okay, perfect. Tea is a common drink by inhabitants of British Isle. Good going. Anyone else who would like to try his hand onto it? So yes, what the point that we were discussing here is we were talking about the simplicity. And if you see that this is maybe if I could take the liberty to term it in the tea is a very common drink liked worldwide. Okay, tea is high on the beverage list. Wonderful. Tea is very common habit among British Isles. Okay, good responses. So I'll start sharing the screen again and then so we were talking about simplicity, and I'll just again request the participants to be reminded of this movie. I think we all would have seen this movie, Three Idiots, and if we can recall the scene where Amir Khan goes into a classroom and he was asked by a professor the definition of the machine, and then he gives us the definition, and professor says, "No, it is not. You are not defining it correctly." And then the other character in the movie gives a long definition and he says, "Yes, this is the one." And he goes back and Amir Khan says, "This is what I was defining in the simplest form. I said that machine is any device which makes our work simpler, and you were not ready to accept it. And then that is the reason I've come up with a very longer definition." So I just wanted to put forth the importance of the element of simplicity. It always help to have a to use simpler words or words which are easily understood by your audience. So you always do an audience analysis. Sometimes we are not able to maybe do an audience analysis because we are not sure where we are going to get into a conversation. But most of the time, say in our professional or in our private in personal lives, we are able to do an audience analysis, and if we can come up to the level of the audience and then frame our words again in this particular element that I have talked about, it has some genesis in the next model that I'm going to discuss. So this is the model that I'm going to present before you. This is known as the scarf model. So the scarf model is again a model which is very recently being developed by a tourist called David Rock. He has developed it in 2008, and this model, though not very very frequently used in communication, it has long rewarding benefits. So I'm just going to discuss the scarf model with you, that what does the scarf model and how we can actually put it into application when we are having a conversation. So the scarf stands for, it's an acronym which stands for the 5 of the words. S is here is for status, and then C stands for certainty, and O for autonomy, and R for relatedness, and F for fairness. So if you see, there are two sides to the circle. You have the negative side, which is a threat. If you say that if you are less, so these are the 5 elements, and if you are less on any of these elements, then in your conversation, you act as a threat. And on the other side, when we look at the positive side, if you are able to analyze these 5 elements, that is the SCARF acronym, and you are able to put, practically apply into a conversation, then you are able to maximize the rewards through a conversation, and you are able to build deep and meaningful relationships, deep and meaningful conversations. Now we are going to spend some time, not more than 2-3 minutes, because we have to take up question and answer also. So I'll just quickly brief you about what all these stands for. See, when we talk about status, And again, as I said, that whenever we are having a conversation, there is a lot which is happening behind the scenes. So there is a lot of neurosciences involved when we are having a conversation. Now, this model is a neuroscience model, and what it says is says that when we are having a conversation, we are having a conversation and it is converting into the words, but behind the scenes your status is also at a play. Now, so if say, I'll try to explain with the help of an example. If we are having a conversation, say between a superior and a subordinate, and a superior comes to the subordinate and tells the subordinate, say that your report was not up to the mark, you had lots of mistakes in your report. Moment the conversation starts on this note, you could see there is the subordinate would experience a lot of threat, and you're moving away from the rewards and you are minimizing the rewards of having this conversation. I'll narrate this a real life example. I have been into that situation, and there the boss goes to the supervisor and tells, your work is not up to the mark, and let me explain to you how it is to be done. The boss explains to the subordinate it has to be done, and he explains the 3 or 4 steps. Next time, the work, there is no improvement, it is as it is. The report is not improved, and it is again full of the same errors. So the boss again goes to the supervisor and says that, see, I've already told you in my prior conversation that you need to take care of certain points, and still you have committed the same mistakes. Now, this keeps on happening, and then after some time the boss realizes his mistake, and he thinks about it, what is going wrong, why I'm not able to improve the performance, or why I'm not able to get the error free report from the subordinate. So he thinks about it, and what he does, he changes the space. Instead of meeting in a cubicle or in the office, he takes the subordinate for a cup of coffee, and he says that, okay, let's go over a cup of coffee, let's sit there and talk. Both of them go for a cup of coffee, and then there he explained how the report is to be done. And wow, that subordinate no guesses gets the point, and when the next time the report is being prepared, it is without any errors. So if you could see, there in the office, and when you are going and visiting your subordinate and you're ordering them, this is what I expect from you, and you see you wasting 10 minutes, 15 minutes having a conversation, and the result or the reward is nullified. The moment you change, I'm not saying that always you need to take it to a third place, but you can always change it. Maybe you can go for, say, you go to a third place which does not remind the supervisor about your status. Maybe you can meet in a boardroom, or you can have a discussion over say a cup of coffee in your pantry or in your canteen. So it does helps. Now we move on to the second aspect, which is certainty. Certainty is the predictability about the future. So again, as I mentioned initially also, that the intent or the purpose of the conversation should be well defined. So take the same conversation, the conversation about having an error-free report between a superior and a subordinate. So how is it? It says that if the superior starts a conversation that, let's meet for 15 minutes, 5 minutes I'm going to hear you out, what are the difficulties you are facing in preparing that report, and then I'll give my viewpoints as to how you can improve on the report. So again, if you see, the conversation has been planned, and the boss or the superior has given clear-cut direction as to what will happen. And as with the human nature, we try to avoid uncertainty. We are more comfortable when we are able to predict the future, right? So here it's not about, predicting 5 years down the line or 30 days down the line. It is just about predicting how this course of conversation is going to be about. So that is certainty. Now, the third element here is A, which is autonomy. Autonomy is that you give a control to the other party or the space to the other party to express. So here again, when we're talking about autonomy, it is also about, the pause element that we have discussed. So it's not just about, talking and putting forth your point or dominating a conversation. When we're talking about leading a conversation, it is also about giving the space to the other person and having their views, their thoughts, or their perspective on the situation. So that is about giving a bit of control to the other person to maybe present a totally different perspective about the conversation, right? Then the next element is about relatedness. Relatedness, again, as we have discussed, the connect. So people who we always, as humans, we always look for that thread of connectedness or relatedness. So again, how we can bring about it, as we have discussed in the previous slides also, when we bring an element of our experience, when we share our narratives, when we share our stories, and that gives a sense of belongingness or relatedness to the other party. And then again, we are able to develop deep or meaningful conversations. And then the last one is about fairness. So fairness is about, again, what is right, what is just, bringing a sense of integrity, bringing a sense of honesty in your conversation. So I know when I'm having a conversation with Parul, then I would be able to maybe decipher some of the facts, that information or that statements that are being made. Those are not just sweeping statements. They are based on maybe some information which can be verified, or they're based on certain authenticity. So if you try to eliminate the threats, you would be able to reap the benefits, and you will be able to maximize the benefits. Now, again, why we are talking and discussing about the SCARF model, I'll give you some data, because we are all professionals. So there's a research which has been conducted, and they have actually given up certain figures, and they say when we have rudeness around the workspaces, when we have rudeness in our conversation, then the statistics goes like this, that it has resulted in 80% of the lost work time worrying about the bad conversation that an employee has experienced. So if I, as an employee, has experienced a bad conversation, maybe with my colleague or my boss, then 80% of my work time, I'm just thinking about it and worrying about it, which has an impact on my productivity. 66% of the respondents said that the performance has declined after having a not so good conversation or a bad conversation. 38% have said that their work quality has suffered after having a bad conversation. And then 48% has said that their work effort has declined after having a bad conversation. So we are not just talking about a conversation for having a good conversation just for the heck of it, but it has, as it goes with any of the organizations, that it has an implication on the bottom line. It has an implication on the productivity of the employees. It has an implication on the profits or the productivity. So I'll just sum up with a quote, and I just wanted to, no offense to any of the participants or any of the gender here, but I just wanted to bring us a pinch of humor, and that is why I've taken the liberty to use this quote, which says, a good conversation is like a mini skirt. It should be short enough to retain the interest, but it should be long enough to cover the subject. So with this, I end my presentation, and I've listed few of the resources. These are the various tests. These are the online tests which you can render it to your employees if you are an HR professional. And these small online tests would give you, these are like self-assessment reports which you can generate for yourself or for your employees, and which would give you some insights as to what type of conversation you generally engross yourself or engage yourself in, and what would you can do to improve it. And then these are some of the suggestive readings. As I said, that I've given the transactional analysis model in my slides. So if you have free time, I would recommend that you can read this book, which is about all about interpersonal communication. And it talks about the 4 life positions. I am okay, you are okay. I am not okay, you are not okay. I am okay, you are not okay. And I am not okay, you are okay. So these are the 4 life positions which have been talked about in detail in this book. And then the other one is powerful conversations, how high impact leaders communicate, and so forth and so on. So I'll now put the house open for question and answer round. If you have any question and answers, you can put forth. Any questions that you have? And then okay, what is I am okay, you are okay in transactional analysis? Mr. Anoop, basically this is about 4 live positions. So based upon the uh, recordings of an individual, the tourists have given that an individual can any of these 4 live positions, which can be termed as I am okay, you are okay. That means when we talk about this live position, that means everything is okay and we can go on having a smooth interpersonal relationship or a communication when we are in this state of our life positions. It means that I have all the good recordings, and then I have a smooth conversation with you, and we are in a state where you are okay and I am okay also. Then there is another perspective to it, that is I am okay, you are not okay. So this is how these are the life position from which an individual speaks from, or establishes any of the foundation of interpersonal communication. So certain people you would have seen in your personal or in your professional life also, they always have this attitude, how dare you talk to me in such a manner? How dare you say this about me? So it's like those persons are generally in a state where you are say, I am okay and you are not okay, right? So and so forth, they have given that other 2 positions. Okay, I'm not okay and you are not okay, and I am not okay and you are okay. So people who are having very low self-esteem, you would have seen people who always think lowly about them. They say, I cannot do it, my life is all is in a mess. So people who always have this thinking about themselves, they are in a life position where they are in a situation, I am not okay, you are okay. So they have very low confidence, they have very low self-esteem. So if you get hold of this book, I think the online version is also available. I would surely recommend it. Okay, can you suggest any book which talks about conversation without hurting anyone's sentiments, or do you have any programs similarly? See, books, I have already given the recommendations. So most of these books that I have recommended, they talk about uh, uh, having conversations which are in the line which you have mentioned, where you say that where we uh, avoid hurting others feelings or others emotions. But I'll just tell you, I think this question has come from Ilan. I'll tell you, see, it's not always. Maybe you are in a position of an authority, maybe I'm a teacher and my student has done some outrageous thing which is not totally acceptable, and I need to speak out. I need to have a conversation where maybe I might hurt the feelings, not consciously but unconsciously. Now there is this method which I think most of you would be aware, but I'm just recalling it for all of you. There is a method which goes by the name sandwich method, and I am very sure that all the HR professional here are very much familiar about it. So they say when you have to convey, say, a criticism about an employee, or you have to give a feedback about your employee which is not so good, always do it in a sandwich method. So I'll again take the instance of the story that I told you about a superior and a subordinate. So instead of the superior straight away going to the subordinate and telling your report is not up to the mark, he could have started in another manner. He could have said, see, most of your work is error free, but I don't know what is the problem with this particular report, and if we can talk about it. So again, see, the tone of the conversation that the subordinate has set in is a totally different tone. Instead of starting on with a negative tone, he has started, most of the time your work is error free and you have been performing consistently well, but there is something peculiar about this report and you're making mistakes again and again. So it's called the sandwich method. But I'll tell you that maybe in life it's not always possible to not to hurt feelings. We again as humans are in the tendency of hurting, maybe not consciously but unconsciously. But as I said, that if you have to avoid consciously, then probably you can go about using this sandwich method. And I hope I have answered your question. Okay, how to communicate with so good listeners. I think, Ajane, you are referring how to communicate with not so good listeners. Yes, we all have experienced it, and we all have been one of those. We all have been one of those where we are not there as an active listener. So there is this technique which is very much in vogue, and there are certain ways which you can practice it, and that technique is called mindfulness, right? So probably if you are a teacher or if you are maybe a superior, then you can recommend few of these techniques of mindfulness. And I'll tell you that this mindfulness technique, to be present in to be there in the present, we always have this. You would have noticed in the interviews also, mostly it happens in the news interview. So the anchor, even before the speaker is done with the answer, the anchor is, or the interviewer is anxious to put forth the next question, because I've already made up my mind. I've lost it 2 minutes back, and I've already made up my mind as to what question I'm going to ask next. So we can practice mindfulness, and we can also recommend it. As I said, if we are say maybe in an HR professional position, or maybe in a superior position, then we can also recommend in a superior in terms of, say, mindfulness. We can always recommend that, and it puts us in the current situation, and we are able to manage, we are able to be present in the situation. And if we need to practice this, and if we need to examine it whether the other party is actively listening or not, I'll tell you the trick is to always put forth questions. So it's always there, to put forth questions and to engage them into your conversation. So you can always say, I think I left the conversation here. Can you please recall what we were discussing? Oh, the first point that I talked about, do you remember? So if you exercise certain strategies like this, I think you would be able to cope up with not so good listeners or active listeners. So try asking questions, try following up with them. Did I make any point? Are you clear on this point? Do you have any questions? So sentences like these or phrases like this brings back your audience into the current situation. And that is why I put forth some exercise into here. Now, Sachin Singh is asking how we can improve our conversation and make it more productive. Yes, Sachin, that is what we have discussed all along. If we can put forth that scarf model, if we remember, the status, and if we can negate the component of the status, or if we can bring in a sense of relatedness, if we can bring a sense of, say, humor, a pinch of humor into our conversation, then probably we are able to make it more productive. As I said, that the scarf model, if you look at the plus sign, and if you work on the status certainty, I discussed about it. So if you plan to have a conversation with your colleague, and if you tell them in advance that this is going to be the due course of the conversation, we are going to start with your point of view, then I'll put forth my point of view, and then we are going to have a brainstorming session. So what I have done, that as an initiator, I have chalked out a clear course of path for the conversation, how we are going to go about it. So if we have a clear chalked out path for our conversation, that obviously it results in having more benefits, or it helps in reaping more benefits. Antina, I think I have already answered your question. I hope it helps. Okay, so I don't see any more conversation. I will hand over the mic to Best of HR Forum. If we can have the results, we have talked about, did we get any responses on the elements that we discussed? And as I told you that it is not based on any research, I just wanted to gauge the nerve or the pulse of the audience as to what do you think is the most important element that a conversation should have. So the three choices that we have listed in our question was humor, connect, and the third one was, if anyone, listening, active listening. So I would request anyone from the Best of HR Forum, Mr. Vijay.
Yes, yes, we have got active listening 7
Right.
and connect 7.
Okay, so wonderful. So I think humor has been left out, and I would presume that you have taken this as a takeaway from the session, that humor also, and when I'm talking about humor, it is not about say making fun. It's just it can be self humor also. So when you are probably making yourself as a center stage, and maybe narrating an embarrassing moment that you have experienced when you are starting on maybe your session, or maybe when you are dealing with your interns or your subordinates. So I'll just move to the last slide. So thank you all. And I would like to give my thanks to Best of HR Forum also. And I'm sorry about the network issues, but I think those are the vagaries of connecting digitally or online. So I hope you would forgive me for those network issues. And I hope that the session would have been meaningful to you all. So thank you all, and thank you Best of HR Forum for organizing and bringing people onto the platform.
Yes. Thank you so much, Parul, because it was pleasure having you with us. It was a very wonderful, insightful session on leadership conversations, how to converse with our executives and with our leaders. So it was very insightful one. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you everyone.